In today's session, I'm going to be talking about how to start the investment journey, where to begin, what you should do first. And I hope that perhaps you'll be able to find some information and some insight that might be able to guide you on the right decisions to make for yourself. Now, you've got to always remember something, that no one understands your personal situation like you do. And so it doesn't matter what I say or what someone else shares. You have to always take the information and process the ideas and study the ideas and ask yourself a simple question. Will this information, can these ideas help me achieve my dreams and goals? Whenever the information or the ideas are not currently suitable for where you find yourself or where you hope to be, what you have to do is put the information aside and find something else. And I recommend the same thing in regards to what I'm about to share with you. It might not be for you right now, but if it is, then I want to encourage you to don't wait too long. Put it to action, test the information, and if you find it to be possible, plausible, and probable, then I want you to try and apply it in your personal life, and you'll produce some very, very interesting and very attractive returns. Now, with that said, I like to start by saying this. Most people begin the journey of investing with the wrong question. The question most people ask is, what do I invest in? There's a presupposition in that statement, and that presupposition is that the assets that you are looking to invest in is without. And by that, what I mean, the asset you're looking to invest in is something external to you. Most people would ask, do I invest in stocks or bonds? Or do I invest in real estate? Do I invest in commodities? Do I invest in digital assets? I always encourage people to recognize that the first decision you should make when it comes to investing is to understand what the real asset really is. In my opinion, I think the real asset is yourself. Buildings, companies, gold, silver, corn, digital assets, currencies, all of those are simply vehicles that enable you get to your destination as quickly as you can. Now, remember what I shared in the very early session. I think it was the first session. I said that let's use the analogy of you traveling from one location to another. The first thing you want to understand is, what is my destination? Where am I trying to get to? The second thing you must be aware of is where you are presently. Then you can work out a means. You need a map, a roadmap, a route to take you from where you are to where you want to get to. As you travel in that direction, we call that success, because you're progressively pursuing and moving in the direction of your dreams. That is success. However, what determines how quickly you get to your destination depends on a number of factors. For example, if you were traveling from London to Manchester, England, it would take you some time. If you were flying, it would take you a certain amount of time. It would take you a shorter time to get from London to Manchester. Maybe it would take you about 45 minutes or less. If you were going to drive, it would take you about 2.5 hours. If you were going to take the train, it would take you about probably 3.5 hours. If you were going to cycle, it might take you approximately about 7 hours to cycle from London to Manchester, England. If you walked, it might take you, who knows, maybe 3 days. Now, each of these methods of transportation have consequences. So in the same way with investing, you have vehicles that take you from where you are to where you want to get to. They help you achieve your goals. However, the asset itself is you. The asset is not a building. Now, you must forgive me because I'm not in any way suggesting that a building or a company is not an investment asset. I'm going to the fundamentals. This is a very simplified version of investing. You are the first asset. You're the main asset. All the other investment vehicles you choose are sub-assets. And here is the reason. The most important thing you have is your earning ability, your ability to earn. That ability to earn depends on how much information, how much knowledge, how much wisdom you have. And the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding you have is directly related to how much you invest in yourself. So the first step to invest in is to invest knowledge in yourself so that you become smarter, so you become better, so you become wiser. Because in principle, with investing, the key thing to remember is it's not an emotional decision. It's an intellectual process. You decide using your intellect. You have to do analysis. You have to do some qualitative analysis and some quantitative analysis. And so your ability to be a good investor depends on your ability to make good decisions. The results you get depends on the quality of the decisions you make. The decisions you make depends on the quality of your thinking. The quality of your thinking depends on, now hear this now because it's so simple, depends on the quality of questions you ask. So if you meet any good investor, what they do most of the time is go through a process of asking and answering questions. You see, they keep asking questions. For example, if it's a company you're trying to buy, you might ask a question such as, what is the return on asset? What is the return on equity? You might ask a question such as, what is the current ratio? Current ratio is simply looking at the current assets divided by the current liabilities. You might ask questions such as, if I were to liquidate this company, what would be the total, money left or capital left? You'd be asking so many questions. So questions guide you towards answers, and the quality of the questions determines the quality of the result. You might ask, those are all quantitative questions I've given you so far, but they're qualitative questions such as, is this company, do I understand it? Is it within what we'll call my circle of competence? You might ask questions such as, are the people who are running the business, are they honest? Are they capable? Are they intelligent? Do they have integrity? Do they have good character? Do they have passion for the business? These are all qualitative analysis. You might ask questions such as, how long have they been running this company for? This is all qualitative analysis. You might ask the question such as, well, does this company have a unique product or service with a competitive and enduring competitive advantage? In other words, is there something that protects the brand? Is there a differentiating product that separates what they produce from the rest? These are all qualitative questions. So the quality of the questions you ask determines the quality of your thinking. Your thinking determines the quality of your decisions. Your decisions determine your investment results. Therefore, if you go back to the lowest common denominator, in order to ask the right questions, you as the investor must invest in yourself. By gathering knowledge and information, you get to a point where the way you think starts to change because you have so much rich knowledge in you. So that's the first thing that I would suggest that you do, that you start with yourself. You are the most important person in the investment process. Once you've started that process of investing in yourself, then the second question you must ask yourself is, who are the players in the game? Now, let me take a step back and give you an overview about what I mean by that. Investing is I call it an intellectual sport. And as part of that intellectual sport, you are playing a game in a market. A market has buyers and sellers. The buyers and sellers determine the means and the terms of trading or exchanging goods or services or capital. You, in many ways, are playing against someone else. You have to be on the winning side, because wherever you have two people transacting, in a market you have a buyer and a seller. The buyer is always buying, believing that the value of what he's buying will go up, and therefore what he's paying is the right price. The seller, on the other hand, is selling because he believes or she believes that the value of what they're selling doesn't have any chance of going further up, and therefore the price will go down. So they're trying to sell. One of you is always right. Now, you want to be on the right side, and that's why you start by investing in yourself. So once you've started investing in yourself, the next thing you want to ask yourself is, what side am I on? Now, in every game, you have rules. I want to say this, and I will hope you understand this. My recommendation when it comes to investing is play within the rules of the game. In every game, you have rules. However, you have to understand the rules well enough, because if you don't understand the rules of the game, you're really like an amateur and you're playing against professionals. The professionals understand the rules, and therefore, if you don't understand the rules, you're going to lose. I'll give you a very classic example about what I mean by that. Let's use a term that most people understand. You have heard of like the stock market. You've heard of things such as hedge funds or mutual funds. Let's use those two as the basis for explaining what I mean by the rules. The stock market or the market is not what we've historically thought it to be. Today, it's really an electronic market. You can go to the market online, on the internet, and wherever you have a buyer and a seller, and an intermediary that facilitates that transaction in real time, that's the market. One of the things you have to understand with the market is the way the stock market is designed is the intermediary, they make their money by getting people to keep trading their assets. It could be gold, it could be stocks of companies, it could be bonds. It doesn't matter what it is, it could be commodities. But the intermediary or the company responsible for facilitating the transaction makes their money by making you trade more regularly. So in many ways, if you're actively trading, you buy today, you wait, it goes up by 2%, you sell, you wait, you buy, and then you just keep buying everywhere. That's not great. Why? Because at the end of the day, if you keep trading your account, you end up with nothing, and the intermediary will end up with all of the money. And the reason is this: for every transaction you process, they make a percentage of what you transact with. In addition, apart from the transaction cost, you have taxation costs. You have what they call a spread, which is the difference between the price you're buying and what the person is selling. So there's so many costs that are put on top of what you're going to get, which you must deduct. So if you're not careful, the regularity of your trading, in many cases, the more it increases, it rises in proportion with the amount of money you actually, in many cases, losing to fees. Now, if you're on the right side of the trade and you have more information than the person who is on the other side, you can still make money. But the point I'm making is, don't assume that you're making all the money, because part of what you earn as profit has to go out back to the intermediary. That is part of a rule. Part of those rules is that every good investor, you want to minimize trading costs. You want to minimize the frequency of your trading activity. Therefore, and by doing that, you minimize the amount you're spending in all this unnecessary costs. That's one of the rules. So you got to understand that. If you go, for example, beyond the market, which I mentioned, and you go into like a company, like a hedge fund or a mutual fund, these are simply companies who will make investment decisions on your behalf, and they will charge you a fee. Again, you have to understand the fee structure, because if you don't understand the fee structure, you lose. Most hedge funds and most mutual funds, the people who run those funds get really wealthy. The people who invest in the funds don't get as wealthy as they should. And the reason is because of the fee structure. Some of them will charge you a 2% fee, between 1 and 2% for managing your account. But in addition to that, they have so many other costs and fees that you have to pay, which they don't tell you at the early stage. But in addition to that, if it's a hedge fund, they also have what they call 2 and 20, like a 20% of the profits you earn, they keep for themselves, which is kind of understandable. They might say to you, well, you pay us 2% management fee. If we exceed 10% in terms of profit, whatever we exceed above 10%, we'll keep 20% of that, which in principle is fine. But the point is, you have to understand the rules of the game. You have to understand the rules of the game. So let me come back to where I started today. And you must forgive me if I've segued a little bit from what I was intending to share. The first part of the process of learning or beginning your investment journey is to understand that you must invest in yourself. The more you invest in your knowledge and your wisdom, the more you become a better thinker, decision maker, and therefore you have better results. The purpose of investing in yourself comes in 3 parts. Now, this is interestingly useful. Number 1, you want to develop the skill set of an investor. Number 2, you want to develop the mindset of an investor. And number 3, you want to develop the wisdom needed to make investment decisions. Each of these are quite interestingly unique. For example, the skill set of an investor who will focus on buying companies, public companies, buying the shares, equity shares of companies is quite different to the skill sets needed for someone who is going to focus primarily on property investing or real estate investing. Likewise, the skill set for someone who's going to focus on fixed securities investment like bonds is quite different. So you need a level of skill. Now, on the mindset level, which is a different part of what you're trying to develop, is you need to understand how to use your mind. Now, let me segue a little bit and just explain what this means. Mindset-wise, we all have a mind. And the way we use our minds determines what we get in life and what we get from life. Now, we have, as part of our mind, we have what we call intellectual faculties of the mind. Now, in your mind, the critical part of understanding how your mind works as an investor is you have your intellect, but you also have emotions. Everyone has this. Doesn't matter who you are and where you were born. You have a mind, and your mind, you have what we call your intellect, and we have your emotions. In your intellect, you have intellectual faculties, such as reason, which is your ability to think. You have imagination, which is your ability to see with your mind's eye, not with your natural eyes, which is sight. You have what we call perception. You have reason, which I mentioned previously. You have intuition. You have your memory. These are all what we call intellectual faculties. Now, the beautiful thing about investing is if you understand how the mind works and you know how to use your intellectual faculties well, you find that you're very good emotionally. The reason is because the way you use your intellect determines your emotional state. Now, this is just pure psychology. But I mentioned at the earlier session, I think it was in session 2, that success in investing has less to do with your ability to have a high IQ, but it had more to do with your psychology. Investing is simply where you have the crossroads, or I call it the intersection, between psychology and economics. Economics meaning knowing what to buy, when to buy, how much to pay. That's all part of your IQ. But the most important part of investing is the psychology. Because we all are different. You have a different personality. So your ability to control your emotions, your ability to think independently, your ability to reason, your ability to be contrarian in your approach, all of these, what I call soft skills, makes you a better investor. Now, why is this the case? Well, it's quite simple. I shared the concept of value investing previously. And I said value investing, in my opinion, is what everyone should try and aspire to either study or understand. Because all intelligent investing is value investing. And value investing simply means you're trying to buy things for a bargain. You're trying to find things that have an interesting intrinsic value. You're trying to define what you believe the price should be, but you're trying to put the price or pay a price that has a sufficient margin, a discount, way below intrinsic value. So you have this buffer which ensures that you never make a loss, but it helps you ensure that you make a profit. That process of buying something at a good price, less than its worth or intrinsic value, is the process of value investing. But here is the most important thing with value investing. You have to understand the relationship between price and value and what separates both. Price and value have an intrinsic relationship. Price will always come down to meet value, or price will go up to meet value. In between is what we call time. So the key to being a good investor is to find something that is selling at a discount to its intrinsic value. You buy it and then you hold on to it. You wait, and over time, what you find is the market then recognizes that we made a mistake in valuing these assets, and the actual value is much more. So price goes up to meet value. So you need patience. And now patience is not something that you need to develop by having a good IQ. Patience is an emotional reaction. So psychology plays a huge role when it comes to investing. So I'll go back to where I started from. I said you need to develop three things: the skill set, the mindset, and the wisdom. What is wisdom? The ability to understand where you might recognize that there's a uniqueness to a situation. There's something different. Someone once said something that I love. They said, if you live your life without ever studying what happened in the past, then you go through life like a child. Very interesting. Anyone who doesn't understand what happened before they were born lives life like a child. Now, history doesn't repeat itself, as Mark Twain said, but it rhymes. When it comes to economics, you find that there's similarities in what happened in the past, which you can use as insights to what could happen in the future. So you can use the past to prepare, so it never happens in the future, or you can use the past to prepare yourself in case something similar happens. And so wisdom is a simple way of having spent time studying. So you gather information, you've studied the information, it's become knowledge, but you understand that knowledge. You comprehend what you've actually read and the information you have. With that understanding, you sit back and you have this ability to know where, when to apply that knowledge. And most importantly, you know when not to use it. So I like to use the principle of a hammer. To a person who only has a hammer, everything looks like a nail. The hammer in itself is like knowledge. Wisdom is what enables you to know when to use the hammer, where to use the hammer, when to put the hammer down and find a different tool. That is wisdom. And that comes by learning from your experiences, but also learning from other people's experiences. So those are the three reasons why you focus on investing in yourself. So let me summarize today's session as I bring this to a close. And I will say this: before you start deciding on what investment vehicle you're going to choose, I think one of the first things you should do is actually ask yourself the question, am I a good investor? Am I a good investor? And the answer to that question will guide you down the path of what you should do next. Now, it's a question you should ask without emotion. Don't get emotional about it. There's nothing wrong in saying, I don't know. I often, when I speak to people, I ask them a couple of questions, and their reaction tells me whether they have a firm understanding about the subject matter. There's nothing wrong with not really having a good understanding, but you must ask yourself the question. And if the answer is, I do not know, or I am not, you must invest in yourself. Now, when the answer is yes, I am a good investor, you have to be very cautious. I would recommend that's where you must focus more and invest in yourself. You see, the reason is because success leads people, especially smart people, into believing that they know what they're doing. Success breeds complacency. And by success, I'm talking about maybe you just thinking that you know enough. And if you're not careful, that is when you often make a mistake. So you always have to stop and ask yourself the question, what am I not seeing? That's wisdom. What am I not seeing? Most people say, yes, I understand investing. And I would often say, well, one of the most important things you have to understand with business or investing are your limits. Now, I talked about playing a game. And if you imagine any game, you have rules and you have boundaries that you must put those rules within. You must play those rules and play the game within certain boundaries. Whenever you go outside the boundaries, in many cases is a foul. Most people, when they play the game of investing, they haven't defined that boundary. So they play very close to the edge, or they get so excited and they go outside the boundary. With investing, the principle of coloring outside the lines doesn't apply. You cannot bring in this positive and futuristic view of life to invest in. If you do that, you get slaughtered. You have boundaries. Part of those boundaries help you stay within what we call your circle of competence, within what you know. So if you're very good in buying companies, it doesn't necessarily make you really good in evaluating bonds. It doesn't make you very good in understanding oil and commodities. You have to go and study and understand the rules of that game because it's a different game. So I would suggest that as you begin your investment journey, always focus on yourself. Start by asking yourself simple questions. And here is my recommendation. Just keep piling on knowledge and piling on more and more knowledge and more and more and more and more. And although you're studying and you might be asking yourself, I don't really understand this, at some point, that information will be very useful. I often encourage people to recognize that when it comes to investing, if you want to study investing and study it well, you have to combine investing with wealth and combine that with business. The three of them go together. Now, once you put that to one side, that's one side of the equation, then you have to study psychology and you have to study people. You have to study a little bit about human interaction. And the reason is simple. When you've studied business, because in many cases, investing is business. You're either buying businesses or you're buying resources or you're buying income producing assets, but the concept is still a business concept. So if you understand a business, you understand how to invest. Now here is why I say all of that. I often encourage people that one of the first things you should also try and do as you study business is study accounting, because accounting is the language that you use for business. It's the language that you use for investing. It's the language of entrepreneurship. It doesn't matter who you are. If you were to travel with me down to a part of France, and we went down to the remote areas of France and they didn't speak any language, and both of us were going to start a business in France, and we had a great idea and a great concept. We arrived. Our success will depend very much on our ability to communicate with the local people. It doesn't matter how great the idea we have is. If we cannot communicate with them, we can't transact. So in the same way, if you can't understand accounting, it means you can't understand the numbers. You've got to be able to read the numbers with business and investing. The numbers tell a story. It's all down to what the numbers say. Yes, stories tell a number and numbers tell a story. So that's the first thing I would suggest you do. Spend some time understanding entrepreneurship, accounting, business and investing, and wealth creation. On the other side, study psychology, how the mind works, understand your emotions, study people, how people interact with each other, how people think, what leads us to make certain decisions, and study, in many cases, the interaction that we have with ourselves and what our true desires and needs are. Because if you understand psychology and you understand a little bit about philosophy and how people think, you'll be able to make good decisions when it comes to investing. Now, that's all I'm going to talk about in today's session. In the next session, I'm going to go a little bit deeper, and then we're going to begin the process. We're going to go into knowing what to invest in, where to begin, and where to start.